Hello and welcome to this, the first in what will become a series of videos looking at the work and the community of UK business forums. Over a period of time, you're going to meet a lot of people, but for today, how about we talk to the man who, not for the first time, has got his hands on the business, because he's the one who in the first instance originated it. My guest today is Richard Osborne. Richard, it's great to have you in front of the camera. We are going to be talking about UKBF over a period of time, but why are we talking about you as an individual first?
The UK Business Forums is a community of business people, and community is the big part of it. Had it in 2003, helped get it up and running, sold it in 2007. There's a 14-year gap. That's one hell of a gap. There's going to be, people are going to want to know who's behind it. What is this person? Community means a lot to people, and they're going to need to trust and understand who this person is. Okay,
UK Business Forums is an extension of an individual. People join that community. Your story as an individual begins with what anybody would describe as a very tough upbringing, a very difficult upbringing. Dare I say it, physically and emotionally as well.
Yeah, there's been a few little events throughout the years. I feel like I could go on, but it's one of those, there's been quite a bit.
In that difficult situation though, in those difficult circumstances, where perhaps you weren't getting parental direction, you talked about as a 4 or 5-year-old, that happened and I went and played. That's a strange kind of a normality for a youngster to have as the foundation to their character. These events continued into adolescence and beyond. They became your normality, and that is a normality that not many people will share.
When it comes to the sharing part of it, I don't know which way to go. I mean, the normality side of it first, actually, I'll sort of roll onto that. When we, because we lived in many places around the country, from Wales, London, Didcot Way, Devon, Kent, Luton is where I finally sort of ended up. It's normal to one degree, but it's not that normal because it forms part of your school life. It affects, when I was going towards the latter end of high school. So when I was in sort of junior school sort of age, I was picking fights with everybody. Literally, and it was, you needed to make sure that nobody beat you in the fight. I was a small fish in a big pond, very much the youngest person in the school again, and I didn't have that reputation I had in primary school or around the area that I lived. And for a few years, I was outsider, and I did get in a bit of trouble now and again, exclude school and what. As you do, but it wasn't until towards the latter end of high school I changed, and we'd have situations where I was becoming aware of some of the stories of my biological dad, basically my mum's sisters and that would tell me stories, and because I was trying to make contact with him and trying to build up a relationship and get back in contact that way. We had issues with my stepdad where there was an incident where we had to get the police out because he turned up drunk at the house and he was waving a knife around and looking to get in the house.
What you talk about there and the story that you told about your mother and the aggression that you witnessed and the sort of numbing effect, the normality of that aggression. That found its way out eventually, though, because you became the aggressor yourself. You ran in with the wrong crowd. That could have been permanent, and yet it wasn't.
Yeah, it could have been. And it was a number of different things happening at the same time that probably helped that. One, I think the first one actually was a friend of mine from school, and I remember he told me about the whole event afterwards. So I was, he was with his girlfriend driving down the road, and he saw me high as a kite with a whole load of crowds, and I was not sure what planet I was really on during those times. And he said to his girlfriend at the time, eventually got married, but said to the girlfriend at the time that, he called me a loser. Like, he remembered me from school, and he's just like going to fall apart, just going to go off the road, loser. And honestly, I have no memory how the next couple of steps happened. I actually don't know what happened, other than somehow or another we ended up making contact, and he saw that through. He actually made that happen, and he took me down to the YTS centre, as it was, youth training scheme at the time, and he was like, "You've got to sort your life out, mate. You're like deadbeat. You need to." And that was probably one of the first stepping blocks. Prior to that, I had hit quite low. I mean, literally, it's on my 16th birthday, I have no explanation for how it happened, but I completely just lost the plot and smashed up the whole family house, and I've got the scars to prove it. So I literally have a tattoo across my scar, which is smashed glass, just to remind me of that incident.
You make this sound as though you were a pressure cooker walking around. There was going to come a point at which this was all going to flash over. And at that relatively tender age, it did.
It did, and that carried on, because around about that point in time, I had so much hatred, literally so much hate inside me. And that stayed with me for quite a number of years. I hated my mum, I hated life, I hated everybody around me. Really, I can't even emphasise it. It was just surreal.
But were you not just reflecting the aggression that was being meted out in front of you within either the school environment or the home environment? I mean, it seems unrelenting from what you talk about.
In hindsight, yes. At the time, so many things didn't make sense. An example, I mean, I've rebuilt my relationship with mum now. In fact, as we sat here today recording this, so she came round our house yesterday, and the relationship is solid. But at that time, I hated her because they say you take things out on the people closest to you, and that's the only way I can explain it. But an example would be that she was never home, and I hated her for that. After, it was myself that kicked her, well, myself and my mum, but we kicked stepdad out of the house, and it was on a Christmas day. It took many years for me to grow to like Christmas again. So there was a period where she was on her own, and silly things like she met men. She's a woman in a relationship. Looking back at it now, as late 40s, makes perfect sense. I have no issue. As a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18, those sort of years, it was just another thing that I'd get stick at school when I was at school for, but her never being home wasn't because of that. She was working a day job and a night job, because now I know that all the debts, the loan sharks, the bank, mortgage, you know, she was trying to meet some payments so that there was the route, you know, so the house didn't get taken away. But as a kid, you don't know that, and so I just, but it's just one thing of hate that just carried on.
You ran off the rails, and you'd run off the rails on more than one occasion.
Mm.
You instanced an instant when somebody sat you down, you talked about YTS, and that person said, you've got to turn your life around, you've got to sort yourself out. From what you say, Richard, that sounds like the first time that somebody actually given you instruction, given you direction. What was your response to that? Because you seem to have been let to run amok up to that point.
Honestly, I don't remember how I felt, and it was the start of a road to a different life, without a doubt. And I can pick up other milestones, but at that particular point, it sounds stupid saying it, I was probably still quite high. I don't actually remember that much about it. What I do remember...
When you say high, by the way, do you mean drugs? Do you mean
Yeah,
alcohol, which is itself a drug? Or do you mean designer drugs?
I've never been, even now I don't really drink much. And yeah, it makes sense, wouldn't having grown up through and seeing what it does. But I was, there was, whether it was trips, whether it was ecstasy, whether it was crack, whether it was...
readily available drugs. So what drew you to this? Did you have no sense of right and wrong? Because you would imagine, and I go back to the very first anecdote that you told in our conversation today, you talked about an attack on your mum by your stepfather with a carving knife. That is wrong. But if you've never been shown the right and the wrong way to life, how do you choose a certain path? You fell in with the wrong crowd. It sounds as though you were living on your wits.
I was more just going with the flow side of things. The term wits, when you say living on your wits, you sit there and think like you're just sort of on the edge, sort of like, you know, what's happening, constantly like seeing what's happening. I don't recall it ever being like that. I recall it being just as, just constant, just the tides flowing, taking you down the river, and you're just on that river and you're just going with it. There's no, there's no signposting. There's no other choice. It's just, if the river takes you down into a drugs den, you're in a drugs den. It's that kind of thing. There wasn't, I wouldn't say I was living on my wits. I was just there. Existing.
So what was the breakout point? What was the turning point for you? Because right now, you're a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde character.
It's the first part, I would, and this guy, I'd say, and in fact I'd actually even mention his name if he ever sees the video, probably doesn't realise what a difference he made to my life. But the YTS scheme put me into a company that was involved in catering equipment, restaurant refurbishments, and the hospitality sector and the equipment that supplied to that. Mm-hmm. And there was this guy who I honestly don't know how I stayed in the job, because I'd turned up to work so many times high on drugs, or I'd come in the morning and then one of my friends had a squat round the corner, so at lunchtime I'd go out, get high on a bong, and then go back into the afternoon. I was out on my tree, and it sounds crazy, but literally it was. I'd be up until 3-4 hours in the morning thieving stuff. I have no idea how he kept me in play, how I held the job down, but it didn't take too long to see this guy running a small business, and he was he's still there, very conscientious guy who, and he had the respect of people around him, and he was giving, I'm just speaking as like an adult business owner now, he was giving these people jobs and opportunities, and he invested in the people around, within the business. It gives them, it put opportunities in front of them to see, to let them grow into those opportunities. And I must have been the most annoying, and at times the most annoying person. But he clearly saw something in me. So the guy's name's Steve Coates, if you ever see this. And I started to look at him as a father figure. Didn't really realise it at the time, but looking back at myself and how I was then, I realised I was. And I just saw legitimate business. You can, a company, work at a company.
You have already experienced business, albeit from a less than legitimate angle. You know about the elements of business. You know about the elements of distribution, of supply, of logistics, of marketing, of pricing, of cash flow. It just happened to be through drug supply and the dealers that you watched doing what they did. What was the turning point for you? At what point did you think, actually, this kind of business is wrong, but I could use the techniques from business to find a better way for myself?
It was quite, there was two factors that really started to make a difference for me there, because I was making good money. I was earning, if I remember correctly, £35 a week on the YTS scheme. At some point, when going to work every day, even though I was in quite a state still, so in the early few years, I was still just going out lunchtimes to a friend's flat and coming back and not really remembering much of each afternoon, and then going out at night and doing the shady business. Something just switched where it felt like I probably should pay a bit more attention to the day job. And at work, I was starting to get pay rises. I was starting to get, would I use the term respect? Appreciation from the boss of the quality of work I could do. And I actually started working 7 days a week. I was given a set.
Voluntarily, you wanted to do it?
I was being paid overtime, okay, but I wanted to. And if I'm honest, I think I was enjoying the attention from the boss, and not in any negative way, but he liked the work I was doing. I'd go and do, I started doing 3-dimensional drawings in CAD. The company had never done anything like that before, and they made a difference to the sales process, and everybody was like, this is really good, this is really impressive. I mentioned earlier, I started networking computers together, so there was it seems so easy today, a light bulb, like amazing moment where I connected 2 computers together so 2 people could do a quote at the same time. I wrote macros on Lotus 123 was the spreadsheet thing back in the day.
I remember it.
And where you could literally just hit a couple of buttons and it would put together all the quote for you, all pricing up, the profit calculated, everything like that. Instead of having to handwrite notes to give to the receptionist to type these up.
So in this sense, what you're talking about is you're now getting balance to your life. Leslie is in the picture. She's showing interest in you. You've got yourself a job. The job is giving you responsibility. You're getting recognition for that responsibility. You're showing that you've got a work ethic, but you've also shown that you've got innovation in mind. So all of these skills are inside you, but this is the first time they've all fired at the same time.
The house eventually got repossessed, and as a family, my mum and me, me and my two brothers, we disappeared. So went off radar. Just disappeared. Nobody knew where we went, and even some of the neighbours and people around there said, "Look, we just don't want to know where you go, because we don't, if we don't know, then when people come knocking, we don't know." Because there was some shady people who really wanted their money back, and where we ended up, there wasn't room for me. Quite literally, there just wasn't room for me in the house, and I ended up moving in with my aunt for a short period of time, which mattress on the floor, my clothes were in a pile in the corner of the room, but it was somewhere to sleep, and it was actually Leslie and her mum who turned around and was like, you can't live like that. Come and move in with us. Jesus, I'm going to get emotional now. So that was quite a big moment. And then living there, we lived there for quite a while with Leslie and her parents. And somewhat that sent me backwards a little bit, because I was living in a rose garden. So Leslie, her parents were happily married for 8 years. They were in the same house where her sister was, the second house her parents had ever owned. It was their family home, and that was it. Complete stability.
A total opposite to what you'd understood in your life up to that point.
Yeah, and I started getting quite angry about that, and it makes no sense to try and explain why to be angry about it. I don't even know whether I was jealous, but it was. I'd say to her, "You have no idea what real life is like. This is."
Could it be that you had an anger for something that had passed you by for so many years, and you could now see, in a parallel sense, what Leslie had been brought up to and brought up with, and perhaps you were angry for something that you would otherwise have had but didn't, and for something that was completely out of your control? You were effectively a victim of circumstance.
It's a nice way to put it. Doesn't excuse it, because some of the ways I don't even know why Leslie stuck with me, because I was really angry. But at one point, her mum turned around and said, "Look, if my daughter's good enough to live under my roof with, then she's good enough to get your own place with." Because I was looking for a flat, just beyond my, just to get my own flat. And at the time, I felt quite railroaded and pushed into settling down with this woman young girl that I was living with, and
well, of course,
you
were the man who didn't want any commitment. You were the man who hadn't had anything. You were the man who had been pushed from pillar to post, and here was somebody who was actually putting a stake in the ground and nailing you to it with her.
What was quite, on reflection, looking back, which I come to learn, is that Leslie's mum had a pretty rough time growing up, and she gave me the push that I needed, but didn't appreciate at the time, and didn't appreciate at the time, but definitely needed to get on a good path.
Family is very important to you. It has become very important to you, your family. And your family can be read in a number of different ways. There's your wife's family, there's your own birth family, there's now the family that you and your wife have created. And dare I say it, you've got a business which is an extension, because businesses they are an extension of the people who own them and who set them up. A business can't have its own characteristics because it is an inanimate object, but it is an extension of the person that sets it up. You've had one heck of a journey, and the journey has not been easy, You've had collapses, you've had points where you've fallen apart, but you and Leslie together have created this union. That union has brought a business together. How far is that business an extension of you, your characteristics, and dare I say it, your values? Because through what you've been telling me here today, you have values. You are values driven, and those values have come out of being, well, very hard won.
It's a lot of it's involved. So from the family side, I have just one goal, and that is I want my children to be able to call somewhere home. So, gee, if I can go again. So silly thing, I don't like moving house. Literally, from my wife, if she wants to move house, and we've moved a couple of times, like she has to put a really strong case forward, and she really has a hard job trying to convince me to move, because I don't want to move house. I literally just want roots solid in the ground. A business I've come to appreciate is a living entity in its own right. A company, if it's a club, if it's a golf club, the golf club has the ethos and culture of those that lead it. If it's a pub, the pub would have the ethos and culture of the landlord. And a business would have the same, the ethos, the culture of the person who runs it.
What do you want to achieve with UK Business Forums? Because I get the sense, Richard, that it's very personal to you.
The bit for me is when I started the business I'm more well known in Northamptonshire for was Quick Formation, so the company startup service. I remember I was working in my kitchen at home, 2 up, 2 down house. Leslie and I were working through the night, packaging up everything up to send out. We had our daughter was 1, well, yeah, from about 6 months to about 18 months. And I was just, it's such a lonely place to be, running your own business and not having colleagues around you, people to talk. It literally is just, it is scary. And UK Business Forums was very much a lifeline for me from a business perspective. Not just business, I still have contact friends that I've made during those times that I still in contact now. And that's what UK Business Forums was for me back then. It's no different 20 years later. People still have those same fears, same doubts. And that's what it's for. That's what the community aspect is for, we're going into a microeconomy now. That's the general consensus, where we're going to have more and more one-person style businesses. Younger people are being encouraged to start companies now, which, you know, there's 2 arguments for that, whether that's right or wrong, but nonetheless it's happening. More now than ever, they need somewhere where when you're shitting yourself, to use an expression, and thinking, am I doing the right thing? Oh, what does this letter mean from HR? Where do you go? Yeah.
All the way back to your earliest days, that first anecdote of your mother and your stepfather, that conditioned, in some respects, your life and your outlook on life, because it's the first thing you told us on this video today. Your mother is still around.
Things have affected us in different ways. And some of the things I've spoken about today, things that I didn't understand as a child, I now understand, helps me appreciate what she did. She feels guilty, and I tell her not to. She feels that, and she said that she feels at the time she's let her sons down, and I'd say she hasn't.
This has been one step along a journey. People will see what you have said on this conversation today. There will be other conversations, and they will be to do with UK business forums. Thank you for taking us all on the journey of your life in this conversation today. Good luck for the future, and be safe.
Thank you.
My thanks to Richard Osborne for our first conversation in what will become, over a period of time, a library of videos about UK business forums, where they take their members, and indeed the future of UK business forums itself. And if you'd like to know more about UK business forums, in any case, look for the links to all of the social media platforms through the comments for this video. For the meantime though, thanks for joining us.